Hey, all, Claudia here for a little quick vlog. I'll try and make this as brief as possible. So, I was looking at the new trilogy in Star Wars, which is about to be finalized in the Rise of Skywalker. And I was sitting here having a real deep thought about all of the defining characteristics that make up a Mary Sue. I was thinking, okay, so in The Force Awakens, you've got Cameron Poe or whatever, Poe Dameron, that's it, I had it mixed up. Poe Dameron is basically the Leia character, because he puts the hidden map in BB-8, and then he's captured, and then he's rescued by essentially the character who represents our Luke analog in the film, which is Finn. Finn is our Luke. He's the person who has the call to destiny, the challenges and whatnot. So, what does that make Rey? Because Rey is the actual Force-sensitive person. And it occurred to me that maybe Rey, in all of this, was kind of basically Han. And that at some point in the mishmashing of the characters and their attributes, some of her character was lost. And I don't know where it went, but unfortunately, they mostly focused just on Rey being female and not on anything else really defining her, which is where a lot of people got the term Mary Sue, in that she's really without flaws. Well, she's not without flaws. Her flaw is that she's naive. She thinks that if she stays on Jakku, that she'll eventually meet her family again, that they'll come back for her. Anyway, it's kind of a weird question there. But she does also work for a large blob-like figure in her boss back on Jakku. So comes the question of, where do we find a Mary Sue in Star Wars? And after thinking just a little bit about some of the characteristics that make up a Mary Sue, I have the answer. Anakin Skywalker is the Mary Sue of the original trilogy. Okay, let's think about this. Attractive yet plain, a Mary Sue usually sees themselves, or herself, depending on whatever you want to categorize this in, as plain or average. So, doesn't consider themselves good-looking. Their looks don't factor in. But in reality, is quite attractive. That kind of describes the older Anakin. Talented. A Mary Sue is extremely talented, often in more than one area. Are you starting to see the similarities here? Destined. Without flaw. Loved by all. No struggle. Now, you would say, okay, well, in The Phantom Menace, he has the struggle of not being accepted as a Jedi because he's too old. So he can't be a Padawan learner or anything like that. Well, that's not really a struggle, because he's still being taught in the ways of the Force, and he's still being taken as a ward, basically, by Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And, Obi-Wan saying, well, I take him as my Padawan, that's clear evidence that there is very little struggle. Okay, well, let's look at Attack of the Clones. His struggle is with his dark side, but that's it. That's the limit of his actual struggle, is a conflict within himself in terms of whether or not he's going to be a good person or a bad person. Well, that's not really much of a struggle. Let's look at some other characteristics. The Mary Sue is too perfect and is an idealized version of an author. Alright, so we know George Lucas wrote this. And as a young kid, George liked hot rods. He liked cars and racing. We know that. And, beyond all of that, there was the sense of the call to destiny. Well, I think that in many ways Anakin was a Mary Sue for George Lucas in his older years, as he was writing the prequel trilogy. Originally, there were other elements to it, and Luke was kind of his Mary Sue, but what really sold me on the idea that Anakin was a Mary Sue in the context of the prequel trilogy was a deleted scene in which Anakin talks with an old woman who runs a kind of junk shop on his way back to his house where Shmi lives. I don't know why they named her Shmi. It sounds like it sounds like a made-up name from Rick and Morty. But besides all that, the old woman who runs the little trading post, or whatever you want to call it, says, "Oh, you're such a good boy, Anakin. Nicest boy in the whole dang world," or whatever. It doesn't matter, because it is, at that point, we're literally just ladling on how perfect this character is. How he, and even Qui-Gon at some point says, he gives without reservation or thought towards himself. And it's like, oh, geez. Like, I realize there's supposed to be this messianic quality about him, the virgin birth, all this other stuff. But at a certain point, you have to realize that Anakin really is a Mary Sue. A lot of his solutions, a lot of his contributions are very happenstance. The fact that Anakin saves the day at the very end by destroying the ship that controls the robots, by flying into the hangar and being in a position where at just the right moment he'll blow up the reactor that is somehow connected to the hangar, and then he'll fly out. While, yeah, it's kind of cute and cool on that level, in and of itself, it also is pretty much a Mary Sue kind of thing to do. It all just comes in and falls in his lap. He's told to hide in a cockpit, which is not a good place to have a kid hide. None of it really makes that much sense. If anything, the better place would be to send him off with Padme, who already likes him, and the other guards, who would keep him relatively safe. And just have him kind of tag along behind and, stay out of danger. But as you get into episodes 2 and 3, you really do come to certain points where it's like, okay, he just naturally knows how to do everything. He's in the pod race in episode 1, and he just is able to make the one thing freeze in midair to where his little magnetic grappler can grab it. In episode 3, when the ship is falling apart and they have to land, he just knows how to control this giant cruiser and make it so that it lands with at least them alive, although I wouldn't call it a very good landing. It's still a crash. But yeah, it's just one of those things where if the character honestly faces no challenges, then it's really hard to say they aren't just a Mary Sue. And with Anakin in all of the films, he really doesn't face that many challenges. He's just naturally good at everything. And it's one of the reasons why Hayden Christensen had such a hard time playing the part. He was definitely a competent enough actor. We've seen him in other things, from sci-fi action films like Jumper to more serious roles. And honestly, I realize that they recast him because he was a bit more lean and handsome than Jake Lloyd was at the time. and they didn't want to really keep the same actor, which I think was unfortunate because they didn't even try to choose an actor that looked a little bit like, the same actor. But by the time they made Attack of the Clones, Jake Lloyd was 14, and they totally could have had him, but they just decided to go with someone else. And I think it was just a little bit too creepy, the idea that this kid who was 14 years old was going to be marrying this young woman who by that time would have been, probably about 20, I guess, in the context of the film. So they had to choose an actor who was a bit older, make them more close to adults. But, I mean, that's one of the other factors of a Mary Sue character in fan fiction and so on. Or as it's called sometimes slash fiction, when it's getting two characters together. In the Mary Sue role, you often have the character having some kind of intimate or even sexual relationship with another character. And in this case, it's very obvious. He has sex with Padme. They have 2 babies. This is after they have a very long and drawn-out relationship series of scenes in episode 2, and it's not very good, unfortunately. So, with all that considered, it's kind of hard to say, how did we never see this before? But if you want to say that Rey is a Mary Sue, she's good at things that you do actually have an explanation for. She is a junker. She's a scrapper. She takes this stuff apart and figures out where it goes and fixes her speeder bike that she has. So she knows machines, and that's her big thing. But that said, that's explained. So, other attributes that we could apply to her being a Mary Sue: no struggle. Absolutely not. She has struggles. She struggles with hunger. She struggles with a greedy boss who is not willing to see her taken care of and wants to keep her desperate for food. Okay. Beautiful yet plain, that's debatable. They don't really draw a lot of attention to looks in the story other than Luke saying that Princess Leia was beautiful given the little hologram. And honestly, that's just lonely farm boy who rarely gets to see women other than his own relatives. Even then, she's like a step aunt, but still. It doesn't really work. Rey is not considered beautiful by anyone. There's no point where Rey is like dressed up or anything. If anything, we get that way more from Poe Dameron and Finn, where Finn will be like wearing the Resistance jacket and feeling like he's impressive or something. I don't know. And Poe Dameron definitely feels like he's good looking enough to get away with stuff, but whatever. His character is obviously meant to be more like Han Solo, but it doesn't quite work for me. But in terms of destiny, there is absolutely no sense of destiny with Rey, other than the fact that she has this Force memory ability, which is touched on in some of the new Jedi Fallen Order video game, which is rated T for teens, so kiddos should not play it. It does have some graphic violence in it. Nothing bloody, but, don't exactly want the little ones playing that. Best for teens and up. Anyway, But in terms of being without flaw, I already discussed Rey does have flaws. Rey is not loved by all. If anything, most people consider Rey fairly unimportant when you think about it. Like, yeah, she gets along okay with Chewbacca, but, you know, Chewie is a pretty loving character. Chewie doesn't really hate too many people who, you know, are nice and whatnot. You know, they've often tried to relate Chewbacca's character to a dog, and there is that sort of animalistic sense of who to trust and how to trust them and how to judge them. And Chewie is a pretty good judge of character. Doesn't care for C-3PO, doesn't have a problem with R2-D2 because R2 helps repair the ship sometimes. You know, there's general attitudes like that. But yeah, Anakin is definitely the Mary Sue of the Star Wars universe, and I hate to kind of bring it down a peg, but that's one of the reasons why the prequel trilogy is not as good. Yeah, you're hearing me say it, folks. I've generally had this opinion that the prequel trilogy has not held up very well as stories, and storytelling is the name of the game. When you watch Empire Strikes Back, which, yes, it is the best of the entire series, it is the best because it had a wonderful storytelling element from Irving Kershner. He made the story into something that people wanted to see over and over again. And one of the reasons was because there were challenges. There were aspects to it that made it more of a struggle for Luke and for Han. The entire story is about the characters struggling and keeping up the fight and failing, but being defiant in the face of failure. That's important. That's something that, you know, a lot of us can identify with. So, you know, as you're looking at it, you're looking at like, oh yeah, you know, you can go and be safe in training and hide away for a while. And honestly, it's questionable as to what exactly would happen. You know, Vader was changing the deal all the time and saying, we're going to, you know, leave soldiers here. Bespin will no longer be a free city. It will be under the rule of the Galactic Empire. Han is going to be frozen in carbonite and sent to Jabba because, you know, if we make these people suffer, Luke will come, and then we'll be able to turn him. And, you know, so there's this huge challenge, and Luke is conflicted. He's like, I need to go and rescue them. I need to go and help them because they're suffering so much. And Obi-Wan levels with him because he's a Force ghost. He can see everything that's happening. Every aspect of this. Yoda is struggling with it. He doesn't want to train Luke because he's been watching Luke from his little hut there on Dagobah. He's been watching Luke his whole life, watching him through the Force, seeing like, oh, yes, this one's always looked away, never been present of mind in the moment. Obi-Wan is struggling. Every character in that story has a struggle. But in the prequel trilogy, you don't get a sense of any struggle from any of the characters. At least I don't. Like, you get the sense, okay, they're talented. Yeah, we know that Luke is a talented pilot, and he talks about how he flies a T-16, and we see the T-16 in the background in his little repair shack underground. So you genuinely do get this good sense of things. But on other levels, Luke is also this dumb farm boy who's never worked a gun turret. So when he's able to take down an Imperial fighter, then hey, there we go. He's like, hey, I got him. And, you know the rest of the scene from there. One of the little hangouts or tropes that it's come out of that particular one is this idea that stormtroopers can't shoot straight, and a lot of that comes from A New Hope. Like, why can't they shoot them? They're all around them. They're in the middle of this giant fortress, and they can attack them from every possible angle, and they can't just shoot directly at them. Well, it's because they're trying to let them escape and get to the rebel base. Okay. But what about in other films? Well, they were shooting pretty straight. A lot of the troops were genuinely, firing pretty accurately. They were taking down the rebels right, left, and center. So, and then in Return of the Jedi, I think that the stormtroopers were genuinely doing that, but they just weren't accustomed to the guerrilla tactics that the Ewoks used. But with all that being said, I think even in the original trilogy, you did not have as much of a Mary Sue character in Darth Vader or anyone else. It did not occur in any of the other films yet. They actually bothered to write a lot of the characters as these relatively flawed, struggling characters who have aspects of themselves. For example, just looking at The Last Jedi, you can easily say that Poe Dameron is a bit of a hothead, but at the same time, the Admiral, the Rear Admiral, is not able to communicate effectively with underlings, including ones who were recently demoted and might feel, without Leia there, like, what are we going to do? One of the challenges of being a leader is that if there's doubts, you don't tell the person, just stay at your post and follow my orders, and call them a hot shot and, knock them down a peg. You say, I realize that you're upset with Leia, kind of out of commission for the time being, but it's going to be okay. I do have a plan. We're going forward with things. I won't go into the full details right now, but I do have a plan. We're going to get out of this. We're going to work on this. It's going to be okay. Those few words of encouragement have a ripple effect, because if Poe Dameron feels comfortable working under this new leader who has just been brought forward for the purpose of this film, then that has an effect on everyone who was kind of loyal to Poe, and he's like, you know what? She says she has a plan. I'm gonna go with it for the time being, because at least she treated me like a human being. She treated me like an adult who is just trying to understand what's going on. And at one point, I think Poe literally says, look, I'm just trying to understand what's going on. And at that point, the Rear Admiral gets pedantic and says, of course you are. Like it's a mom talking to a child. No one is going to listen to someone who bothers to do that. And if you were a Rear Admiral, you would know that. Even captains know. Yeah, we need to talk this out. I need to make sure that everyone who is, under me, who's working for me, has my back. I need to let them know. I need to communicate confidence and assurance and put to rest their doubts, especially when things are looking really scary. We just lost our Admiral. We lost Leia. She's out of commission for the time being. We need to kind of get together and form a bit of a plan. Okay. You don't just tell someone to shut up and go do what they tell you. That's the kind of thing that Leia tried in the first movie. She said, I don't know who you are or where you came from, but from now on, you do as I tell you, okay? And what is Han's immediate response? He gets ticked. He is not thrilled with being talked to like that. Because he's the one who has as far as he knows, he's never getting his ship back if he ever gets a reward, as he was initially promised. He has a gangster breathing down his neck for money. He's got bounty hunters on his tail. He knows that he is seriously in the deep stuff, and he has to know that everything is going to work out a little bit, and he just got told by a little girl that that she's the boss as far as she's concerned, and he's just an idiot. Well, Han might be stupid, I don't know. I'm never going to pretend that Han was a real Nobel Prize physicist there. But I am going to say that it doesn't work to get pedantic or belittling or whatever with people that you need to rely on. And as things moved on with the two of them, there was still that bit of tension, but you know, there was also that bit of swing of the pendulum the other way, where they really did develop an affection, and it was because they kind of wanted something more from the other, but she's not allowed because she's a rebel leader. She is trying to lead a cause. She has to be a figurehead. She can't be vulnerable. And if she's about to lose someone, or if she falls in with someone who is just a scoundrel, then that's not going to work. So what do we have in the new trilogy? Well, not a whole heck of a lot there. What is the conflict between the characters? What makes them argue? Well, they don't argue. The most that they argue about is, oh no, how are we going to get out of this situation where TIE fighters are shooting at us? Oh, we can take that ship, that one's garbage. We'll take that one. Oh, it's blown up, garbage will do. It's that, why are you holding my hand is one element of conflict. It's kind of minor. It's not really as big a thing. None of the conflicts among the characters in the new trilogy are really that good, but by contrast, there are virtually no conflicts that I know of within the prequel trilogy. There's a little bit of a contention between Qui-Gon and Padme. That's it. So, I can't really categorize any of the characters in the Mary Sue context other than Anakin. Anakin is definitely the Mary Sue of the Star Wars prequel trilogy, and I hate to say it, but that's what dragged it all down, my friends. With that being said, thanks for clicking on and listening, and I hope to catch you again next time. If you want to, click like, click subscribe, ding the bell, do whatever you like. And if you want to, leave a constructive and respectful comment below. I always try and take those and, take them as much as I can. I do try and respond, positively to anything that's actually productive or relevant. Some people decide that they need to comment with something weird that doesn't quite make sense, but whatever. All that aside, go ahead and if you want to, you can donate to my Patreon campaign or the Cash App. Just look me up on there. It's Claudia, just like the channel. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.